The campfire crackled, its embers spitting into the night like secrets too heavy to hold. I was 17, and the summer of 2025 at Camp Willow Lake was supposed to be my escapee, a chance to be someone other than the quiet kid from suburban Ohio. But then I heard him coach Ethan, his voice low and trembling, whispering to the stars that he loved me. It was the second night of camp, and I'd slipped away from the group, my sneakers crunching on the pine needles as I wandered toward the lake. I wasn't supposed to be there, not past curfew, but the weight of being the new kid, the one who didn't quite fit, drove me to the water's edge. That's when I heard Ethan's voice, soft and raw, carried on the breeze. God, I love him, but I can't. I froze, my heart slamming against my ribs. Ethan, the 25-year-old coach with eyes like a storm and a smile that could unravel anyone, was talking about me. Elliot Harper, the gangly kid who'd barely spoken to him. I didn't know why he'd say it or what it meant, but those words branded themselves into my soul. For the rest of the summer, they became my compass and my curse. Camp Willow Lake sprawled across 100 acres of dense forest and shimmering water in upstate New York. It was the kind of place where kids like me were searching, a little lost, came to find themselves. Or, at least, that's what the brochure promised. I'd signed up for the archery program, mostly because it sounded less humiliating than team sports. Ethan was the head coach for outdoor activities, a former college athlete who moved with a quiet confidence that made everyone want to be near him. He was all sharp angles and easy laughter. But after that night by the lake, he wouldn't look at me. The avoidance started small. He'd call on other campers during roll call, his gaze skipping over me like I was invisible. When I raised my hand to ask about bowstring tension, he'd nod curtly and move on. By the third day, it was obvious Ethan was dodging me. I didn't understand why, but the memory of his whisper kept me awake at night, replaying in my head like a song I couldn't shake. Elliot, you okay? My bunkmate, Sam, nudged me one morning as we trudged to the mess hall. Sam was a wiry kid from Brooklyn, all freckles and sarcasm, who'd already decided we were friends. Yeah, I lied, my eyes drifting to Ethan across the field, where he was demonstrating a fire-starting technique to a group of giggling girls. His shirt clung to his shoulders, damp with sweat, and I hated how my stomach twisted at the sight. You've been weird since we got here, Sam said, squinting at me. You got a crush or something? I choked on my own spit. No way, I snapped. Too quickly. Sam raised an eyebrow but didn't push. I wasn't ready to admit anything, not to him, not to myself. Growing up in a small town, I'd learned to keep my feelings locked tight. Being gay wasn't something you shouted about where I came from. But Ethan's words had cracked that lock, and now I was spilling over with questions I didn't know how to ask. That afternoon, during archery practice, I decided to test him. I lined up my shot, my fingers trembling as I pulled the bowstring taut. The arrow flew wide, thunking into the dirt. Ethan was there, as always, watching from the sidelines. But when I turned to him, expecting feedback, he was already walking away, his back stiff. Nice aim, Harper, one of the other campers, a guy named Jake, sneered. Jake was the kind of kid who thrived on making others feel small. I ignored him, but his words stung. I wanted Ethan to notice me, to say something, anything. But he didn't. By the end of the first week, I was a mess of hope and frustration. I started finding excuses to be near him, volunteering to carry equipment, lingering after activities. Once, I caught him watching me as I stacked firewood, his expression unreadable. Our eyes met, and for a split second, I thought he'd say something. But then he turned away, his jaw tight, and disappeared into the counselor's cabin. The camp was alive with rumors. Some said Ethan was ex-military. Others that he dropped out of college after a bad breakup. Nobody knew much about him, but everyone wanted to. He was the kind of person who made you feel seen, even when he was avoiding you. Or maybe that was just me, projecting my stupid, desperate heart onto him. One night, I couldn't take it anymore. The counselors were hosting a stargazing event, and I saw my chance. The group was spread out on blankets by the lake, the sky a canvas of silver pinpricks. Ethan stood at the edge, pointing out constellations to a cluster of campers. I waited until the others were distracted, then approached him, my palms sweaty. "Coach Ethan." My voice cracked, betraying me. He turned, and for the first time in days, his eyes locked on mine. They were dark, almost haunted. "What's up, Elliot?" His tone was neutral, but there was a flicker of something fear. Maybe. Or longing. "I heard you," I blurted, my voice barely above a whisper. "That night by the lake. I heard what you said." His face went pale, and for a moment, I thought he'd bolt. But he didn't. He just stood there, his breath uneven, as the stars burned above us. "What did you hear?" he asked, his voice so low it was almost swallowed by the night. I opened my mouth to answer, but the words caught in my throat. What could I say? That I'd been carrying his confession like a lifeline. That it was breaking me apart. Before I could decide, a camper called his name, and he was gone again, leaving me with nothing but the echo of his whisper and a summer that was already slipping through my fingers. The next morning, the air at Camp Willow Lake felt heavier, like the weight of Ethan's silence had settled over the entire forest. I woke with his question, "What did you hear?" looping in my mind, sharp and unrelenting. I'd been too stunned to answer him last night, and now the moment was gone, buried under the routine of camp life. Breakfast in the mess hall was chaos. As always, Sam was ranting about how the pancakes tasted like cardboard, but I barely heard him. My eyes kept drifting to the counselor's table, where Ethan sat, laughing with another coach, his face a mask of ease. How could he act so normal when I was unraveling? I pushed my food around my plate, my stomach too knotted to eat. "Seriously, Elliot, you look like you saw a ghost," Sam said, waving a fork at me. "What's going on?" "Nothing," I muttered, but my voice was thin, unconvincing. Sam didn't buy it, but before he could press, Jake sauntered over, his smirk sharp as a blade. "Harper, you gonna cry because Coach Ethan didn't hold your hand during stargazing?" He taunted, loud enough for half the table to hear. Laughter erupted, and my face burned. I wanted to disappear, but Sam shot Jake a glare. "Shut up, Jake. At least Elliot's not failing archery," Sam said, his voice cutting. Jake scoffed but backed off, and I forced a weak smile at Sam. He didn't know the half of it, but his loyalty steadied me. Archery practice that afternoon was torture. Ethan was there, of course, his presence like a magnet I couldn't escape. I tried to focus on my form, but my hands shook, and my arrows kept missing the target. When Ethan finally approached, my heart leapt until I saw his expression. Cold. Professional. "Elliot, keep your elbow up," he said, his voice clipped. He didn't meet my eyes. Before I could respond, he was already moving to the next camper. It was like last night's conversation never happened. like I'd imagined the tremor in his voice. I wanted to scream at him, to demand answers, but I didn't. Instead, I poured my frustration into my shots, each arrow a silent plea for him to notice me. By the end of the session, my arms ached, and I'd hit the target twice. Small victories, but they felt hollow. That night, the camp organized a canoe race across the lake. I paired up with Sam, who was annoyingly good at everything outdoorsy. As we paddled, I caught sight of Ethan in another canoe, coaching a younger group. His laughter carried over the water, bright and carefree, and it twisted something inside me. How could he laugh like that when I was drowning in his words? "Elliot, paddle, man," Sam shouted, snapping me out of it. I dug my paddle into the water, but my rhythm was off, and we veered left. Sam groaned, but didn't complain. When we reached the shore, soaked and in last place, he just clapped me on the back. "We'll get him next time." I nodded, but my eyes were on Ethan, who was helping a kid tie up their canoe. He glanced my way for a split second, and I swear I saw something flicker in his expression: regret, maybe, or guilt. But then he turned away, and I was left with nothing but the ache in my chest. Later, as the campers gathered for a bonfire, I slipped away to the dock, needing space to breathe. The lake was a mirror, reflecting the stars and my own fractured thoughts. I didn't hear Ethan approach until his shadow fell over me. "Elliot," he said, his voice soft but firm. "You shouldn't be out here alone." I turned, my heart racing. "Why do you care?" The words came out sharper than I meant, but I didn't take them back. He flinched, his hands shoving into his pockets. "I'm your coach. It's my job to care." "That's not what I meant," I said, standing now, my voice trembling. "Why are you avoiding me?" "I heard you, Ethan." "I know." His face tightened, and for a moment, I thought he'd deny it. But then he sighed, a sound so heavy it seemed to carry the weight of the world. "You don't understand. Elliot, you're 17. I'm your coach." He gestured between us, his hand shaking. "It can't happen." "Why not?" I demanded, stepping closer. "You said you loved me." I heard it. His eyes widened, and he took a step back, like my words were a physical blow. "You don't know what you're asking for," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "You don't know what this could cost me." Before I could respond, a shout from the bonfire broke the moment. Ethan's head snapped toward the sound, and when he looked back at me, his expression was shuttered. "Go back to the group," he said, turning away. I stood there, the dock creaking under my feet, as his footsteps faded into the night. He was running from me, from whatever this was, and I didn't know how to make him stop. But I wasn't ready to give up, not when his words still burned in my chest. Not when I was starting to realize I might love him too. The days at Camp Willow Lake blurred into a haze of routine archery, hikes, campfires, but each one carried the weight of Ethan's absence. Not physical absence. He was everywhere, leading activities, joking with campers, his voice a constant hum in the background. But he was a ghost to me, always just out of reach, his eyes never lingering. I tried to bury my feelings, to focus on the camp's rhythm, but every glimpse of him was a reminder of that night on the dock. "You don't know what this could cost me." His words haunted me, sharp and cryptic, but they didn't douse the fire his confession had lit. If anything, they made me want to understand him more. Sam noticed my distraction. "You're obsessed," he said one morning as we laced up our boots for a group hike. His tone was light, but his eyes were sharp, like he saw more than I wanted him to. I'm not. I lied, tugging my laces tight. Just tired. He snorted. Sure. Tired of staring at Coach Ethan like he's the last slice of pizza. I glared at him, but my cheeks burned. Sam didn't know about the whisper, but he wasn't stupid. I needed to be careful. The last thing I wanted was for rumors to spread, especially with Jake lurking, always ready to pounce on any weakness. The hike was grueling. A 5-mile trek through the forest to a lookout point. Ethan led the group, his voice steady as he pointed out landmarks. I hung back, watching him, trying to piece together the puzzle of who he was. Why had he said he loved me? Why was he so afraid? Halfway through, we stopped for a water break. I sat on a fallen log, pretending to adjust my backpack, when I overheard 2 counselors talking nearby. Ethan's got a lot on his plate. One said, family stuff back in Boston. He's only here for the summer. Family stuff. The word stuck with me. A new piece of the mystery. Was that why he was so guarded? I wanted to ask him, to bridge the gap between us. But every time I got close, he slipped away. That night, during a camp-wide talent show, I saw another side of him. Ethan took the stage with a guitar, his fingers coaxing a soft, soulful melody from the strings. The crowd fell silent, captivated, and I felt my heart stutter. He sang about longing, about roads not taken, his voice raw and aching. I wondered if he was singing to me, if each note was a confession he couldn't say aloud. When he finished, the applause was deafening, but I barely heard it. I was too busy memorizing the way his hands gripped the guitar, the way his eyes scanned the crowd but never found mine. After the show, I lingered, hoping for a moment alone. But Jake cornered me first. Got a thing for Coach Ethan? Huh? He said, his voice low and mocking. Careful, Harper. People might start talking. Leave me alone, I snapped, shoving past him. But his words lingered. A cold reminder of the world outside camp, where people like me weren't always safe. The next day, during a team-building exercise, I got my chance to confront Ethan. The task was a trust fall, and somehow, I ended up paired with him. My heart pounded as I stood on the platform, my back to him, his hands steadying my shoulders. Ready? He asked, his voice close, warm. I nodded, my throat tight. I fell, and he caught me, his grip firm but gentle. For a moment, we were too close and I felt the heat of his breath against my neck. Thanks, I said, turning to face him. His hands lingered a second too long before he let go, his expression unreadable. Anytime, he said, but his voice was strained, and he stepped back quickly, like he'd crossed a line. That night, I couldn't sleep. The cabin was quiet, the other boys snoring softly, but my mind was a storm. I slipped out, heading for the lake again, drawn to the place where this all began. To my surprise, Ethan was there, sitting on the dock, his silhouette stark against the moonlit water. Elliot, he said, startled, when he saw me. You shouldn't. I'm tired of shouldn't. I cut in, my voice shaking. I heard you say you love me. Ethan. I can't pretend I didn't. And I think I swallowed hard. I think I might feel the same. His face crumpled, a mix of pain and something softer, something I couldn't name. Elliot, you're a kid. I'm your coach. This isn't some movie. It's real life. and real life has consequences. Then why say it? I demanded. Why let me hear it if you're just going to push me away? He stood, pacing the dock, his hands raking through his hair. Because I'm an idiot, he said, his voice breaking. Because I didn't mean for you to hear. Because I'm trying to do the right thing. And it's killing me. I stepped closer, my heart in my throat. What's the right thing? Ethan. Ignoring me. Pretending this doesn't exist. He stopped, his eyes locking on mine. And for a moment, I thought he might kiss me. But then he shook his head, his voice barely a whisper. Go back to your cabin. Elliot. Please. I left, but not before I saw the tears in his eyes. And as I walked away, I knew this wasn't over, not for me. And not for him. The summer at Camp Willow Lake was slipping away. Each day a little shorter. A little heavier with the weight of what Ethan and I couldn't say. His tears on the dock had cracked something open in me. A reckless kind of hope that refused to die. But with every passing moment, he seemed to pull further away. His avoidance a wall I couldn't climb. I threw myself into camp activities, trying to drown out the ache. Archery became my refuge. The steady rhythm of knocking arrows and aiming at targets away to quiet my mind. Sam noticed the change. His usual banter replaced with quiet concern. You're gonna wear out that bow, man, he said one afternoon, watching me fire shot after shot. Maybe that's the point, I muttered, letting another arrow fly. It hit the bullseye, but the victory felt empty. Ethan was across the field, teaching knot tying to a group of younger kids. His laughter a sound I both craved and hated. That evening, the camp hosted a movie night under the stars. The counselors set up a projector, and we all sprawled on blankets, watching some old adventure flick. I sat with Sam, but my eyes kept drifting to Ethan, who was perched on a log at the edge of the group. He was alone, his face lit by the flickering screen, and for the first time, I saw how tired he looked. When the movie ended, I lingered, pretending to help clean up. Ethan was stacking chairs, his movements mechanical. I took a chance, grabbing a chair and falling into step beside him. Need help? I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. He glanced at me, surprised, then nodded. Sure. We worked in silence, the air thick with unspoken words. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. Why do you keep running from me? I asked, setting down a chair with more force than necessary. He froze, his hands tightening on the chair he was holding. Elliot, we've been over this. No, we haven't, I said, my voice rising. You say you're doing the right thing, but you're not. You're just making us both miserable. His jaw clenched, and he looked away, his eyes fixed on the dark forest beyond. You think I want this? You think I don't? He stopped, swallowing hard. I could lose everything. Elliot. My job. My reputation. You don't get it. Then make me get it, I said, stepping closer. Tell me what's stopping you. For a moment, he didn't speak. Then, in a voice so low I barely heard it, he said, my family. They're traditional. If they found out he broke off, his hands shaking. I've already lost too much. The words hit me like a punch. I'd spent so long caught up in my own feelings that I hadn't considered his. What did you lose? I asked softly. He hesitated, then sat on a nearby bench, his shoulders slumping. My brother, he said finally. He came out a few years ago. And my parents, They cut him off. I haven't seen him since. I can't, his voice cracked. I can't go through that again. I sat beside him, my heart aching. I'm sorry, I said, and I meant it. But you don't have to go through it alone. He looked at me then, his eyes raw and searching. You're 17, Elliot. You've got your whole life ahead of you. I'm not worth this. You don't get to decide that, I said, my voice fierce. I know what I feel, and I know what I heard. Before he could respond, footsteps crunched behind us. It was Jake, his smirk visible even in the dim light. Cozy, he said, his tone dripping with malice. Careful, coach. People might get the wrong idea. Ethan stood, his face hardening. Go to bed, Jake, he said, his voice like steel. Jake laughed, but left, and I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the night air. The next day, Jake's taunts were louder, his comments sharper. He didn't say anything outright, but the whispers followed messnickers from other campers. Sideways glances. Sam tried to shut it down, but the damage was done. I felt exposed, like my heart was on display for everyone to judge. During a group swim, I caught Ethan watching me from the shore, his expression unreadable. I swam harder, pushing myself until my lungs burned, trying to outrun the fear creeping into my chest. When I finally emerged, dripping and exhausted, he was gone. That night, I found a note slipped under my bunk. It was simple, written in Ethan's sharp handwriting. Meet me at the lake. Midnight. My heart raced as I read it, hope and dread tangling inside me. When midnight came, I crept out, the camp silent except for the hum of crickets. Ethan was waiting on the dock, his silhouette stark against the water. I shouldn't be here, he said as I approached, his voice low. But I can't keep doing this to you. Then don't, I said, my voice trembling. Stop running. He looked at me, his eyes glinting in the moonlight. And for the first time, I saw him really saw him. Not the coach, not the mystery, but a man carrying a weight I was only beginning to understand. And in that moment, I knew I'd do anything to help him carry it. The moonlight on the lake was a fragile thing, shimmering like it might break if I breathed too hard. Ethan stood on the dock, his hands shoved deep in his pockets, his eyes fixed on me with an intensity that made my skin burn. I'd asked him to stop running, but now, standing so close, I wasn't sure I was ready for what might happen if he did. Elliot, he said, his voice rough. This isn't fair to you. I'm your coach. I'm supposed to protect you. Not, he stopped, running a hand through his hair. Not this. Then why are you here? I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. You could have ignored me. You didn't have to leave that note. He let out a shaky laugh, more pained than humor. Because I'm selfish. Because every time I see you, I forget why I'm supposed to stay away. My heart stuttered. I took a step closer, close enough to see the tension in his jaw, the way his eyes flickered with something raw and unguarded. Then don't stay away, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I'm not a kid. Ethan, I know what I want. He shook his head, but he didn't move back. You're 17. You don't know what this means. The world out there, he gestured vaguely toward the darkness beyond the camp. It's not kind to people like us. Like us, I echoed, the words sinking in. It was the first time he'd acknowledged it so clearly, and it felt like a lifeline. So you are, like me, He looked away, his shoulders slumping. Yeah, he said softly. I've known for years. But knowing and living it are two different things. I wanted to reach for him, to bridge the gap between us. But Jake's taunts echoed in my mind, a reminder of how dangerous this could be. Instead, I sat on the edge of the dock, letting my legs dangle over the water. After a moment, Ethan sat beside me, the space between us electric. Tell me about your brother, I said, needing to understand the weight he carried. He was quiet for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. Then, in a low voice, he said, his name's Caleb. He was my best friend growing up. When he came out, I was the only one who stood by him. My parents, they called it a sin. They said he was choosing to be this way, that he could change if he wanted to. He left home at 19, and I haven't heard from him since. My chest ached for him. That's why you're scared, I said. You think it'll happen to you too. He nodded, his eyes distant. I'm not just scared for me, Elliot. I'm scared for you. You're still in high school. You've got a life to build. Getting involved with Mike could ruin that. I turned to him, my voice fierce. You don't get to decide what ruins my life. I've spent years hiding who I am. Ethan, I'm done with that. I'd rather risk everything than keep pretending. His eyes met mine, and for a moment, the world fell away. Then, slowly, he reached out, his hand brushing mine. It was a small gesture, but it sent a jolt through me, like lightning finding ground. We can't do this here, he said, his voice hoarse. Not at camp. Not with everyone watching. Then what do we do? I asked, my heart pounding. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he stood, pulling me up with him. We figure it out, he said. But not tonight. Go back to your cabin, Elliot. Please. I wanted to argue, to stay, but the look in his eyes stopped me. I nodded and left, the warmth of his touch lingering on my skin. The next day, camp felt different, like the air itself was charged. Jake's whispers had spread, and I caught campers staring, their murmurs sharp and cutting. Sam stuck by me, his presence a shield, but I could feel the weight of their judgment. During archery, Jake made a point of bumping my shoulder as he passed, muttering, "Freak." I clenched my jaw, refusing to let him win. But when I looked for Ethan, he was gone, replaced by another coach. Panic flared in my chest. Had he left? Was he running again? I found him later, in the equipment shed, sorting ropes. He looked up when I entered, his face tightening. Elliot, you can't be here. Where were you today? I demanded, closing the door behind me. You didn't show up to archery. I needed a break, he said, his voice flat. This is getting out of hand. People are talking. Let them talk, I said, stepping closer. I don't care. But I do. He snapped, his eyes flashing. You think this is just about us? If this gets out, I lose my job. You get sent home. And your parents, he stopped, his breath uneven. What happens when they find out? I hadn't thought about my parents. Not really. They weren't like Ethan's mine were quiet, distant, but not cruel. Still, I didn't know how they'd react. The thought made my stomach twist, but I pushed it aside. We'll deal with it, I said. Together. He stared at me, his resolve wavering. Then, in a rush, He closed the distance between us, his hands cupping my face. For a moment, I thought he'd kiss me, but he just pressed his forehead to mine, his breath warm against my skin. "You're gonna break me, Elliot," he whispered. Before I could respond, the shed door creaked open, and we sprang apart. It was Sam, his eyes wide. Sorry," he stammered. "Just looking for a paddle." Ethan turned away, his face unreadable, and I knew the moment was gone. But as I left the shed, Sam's hand on my shoulder, I felt a spark of something new: hope. Maybe. Or defiance. Whatever it was ours. The air at Camp Willow Lake had turned brittle, like the whole place was holding its breath. Sam's interruption in the shed left me shaken, but his quick grin and refusal to ask questions kept me grounded. He didn't say anything about what he'd seen, but I knew he'd seen enough. For now, he was keeping my secret, and that was more than I could have hoped for. Ethan, though, was a different story. After the shed, he doubled down on avoiding me. He skipped meals in the mess hall, delegated archery to another coach, and stayed on the opposite side of every group activity. It was like he'd built a fortress around himself, and I was left outside, banging on the walls. I tried to focus on camp, on the little moments that kept me sane: Sam's bad jokes, the satisfaction of hitting a bullseye, the quiet beauty of the lake at dawn. But Ethan's absence was a hole I couldn't ignore. Every time I saw him, my chest ached with the memory of his forehead against mine, his whispered words, "You're gonna break me." One afternoon, during a survival skills workshop, I overheard a counselor mention Ethan was leaving early before the summer ended. The words hit like a punch, stealing my breath. He couldn't leave. Not now. Not when we were so close to something real. I had to talk to him, to make him see we could figure this out. I found him that evening, alone by the campfire pit, stacking logs for the night's bonfire. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of fire. And for a moment, he looked like he belonged to the flames, wild, untouchable. "Ethan," I said, my voice cutting through the quiet. He stiffened but didn't turn. "Is it true? Are you leaving?" He set down a log, his movement slow, deliberate. "Who told you that?" "Does it matter?" I stepped closer, my hands clenched. "You can't just run away. Not after everything." He finally faced me, his eyes tired but fierce. "I'm not running, Elliot. I'm trying to protect you. Protect us." "By leaving." My voice cracked, and I hated how young it made me sound. "That's not protecting me. That's giving up." He flinched, his hands flexing at his sides. "You think I want this? You think I don't lie awake every night, hating myself for what I feel?" But this, he gestured between us, his voice breaking. "It's not just about us. There are rules, Elliot. Laws. I could lose everything. And you," he stopped, his eyes glistening. "You deserve better than a summer fling that could ruin your life." "It's not a fling," I said, my voice low but steady. "Not to me." He stared at me, his breath uneven, and I saw the fight drain out of him. "You're killing me," he whispered, stepping closer. His hand hovered near my arm, like he wanted to touch me but didn't trust himself. "Then let me," I said, reckless. "If it's gonna hurt, let it hurt. Just don't leave." Before he could respond, voices approached, campers heading to the bonfire. Ethan stepped back, his face closing off again. "Go," he said, his voice barely audible. Please. I left, but not before I saw the anguish in his eyes. It was the same anguish I felt, tearing me apart from the inside. The next day, Jake's taunts escalated. During a group game of Capture the Flag, he shoved me hard, hissing, "Stay away from Coach Ethan. Freak." The word stung, but worse was the way the other campers laughed, their eyes cutting into me. Sam was there in an instant, pushing Jake back, but the damage was done. The whispers were louder now, a chorus I couldn't escape. That night, I couldn't sleep. The cabin felt suffocating, the air thick with the weight of judgment. I slipped out, heading for the lake, my sanctuary. To my surprise, Ethan was there again, sitting on the dock, his head in his hands. "Elliot," he said when he saw me, his voice weary. "You have to stop doing this." "No," I said, sitting beside him. "You don't get to tell me to stop. Not when you're the one who started this." He let out a bitter laugh. "I didn't mean to. I didn't mean for any of this to happen." "But it did," I said, my voice fierce. "And I'm not sorry. Are you?" He looked at me, his eyes searching mine, and for the first time, I saw him let his guard down. "No," he said softly. "I'm not." We sat in silence, the lake lapping at the dock, the stars burning above. Then, slowly, he reached for my hand, his fingers intertwining with mine. It was the first time we'd touched like this, deliberate and unafraid, and it felt like the world had shifted. "I don't know how to do this," he said, his voice raw, "but I don't want to lose you." "You won't," I said, squeezing his hand. "We'll figure it out. Together." For the first time, I believed it. But as we sat there, hand in hand, I couldn't shake the feeling that the world was watching, waiting to tear us apart. The dock became our secret, a fragile space where Ethan and I could exist without the world's weight pressing in. That night, holding his hand, I felt invincible, like we could face anything as long as we were together. But morning brought reality crashing back, sharp and unforgiving. Jake's campaign against me had spread like wildfire. By breakfast, the whispers were a roar. Campers avoided me, their eyes darting away when I passed. Sam stuck by me, his loyalty fierce, but even he couldn't shield me from the stares. "They're just idiots," he said, slamming his tray down at the mess hall. "Ignore them." But I couldn't. Every snicker, every sideways glance, felt like a blade. Worse, Ethan was pulling away again. He was at every activity, his presence a constant ache. But he wouldn't look at me. It was like the dock had been a dream, and now we were back to square one. I confronted him that afternoon, catching him alone in the counselor's cabin. "What's going on?" I demanded, closing the door behind me. "Last night, you said you didn't want to lose me. Now you're acting like I don't exist." He leaned against the desk, his face drawn. "Elliot, people are talking. Jake's been running his mouth, and the other counselors are starting to notice. If this gets back to the camp director, let it," I said, my voice shaking with anger. "I'm not ashamed of who I am. Are you?" He flinched, his eyes dark with pain. "It's not about shame. It's about survival. You don't know what it's like out there. Elliot, you're still a kid. Stop calling me that." I snapped, stepping closer. "I'm not a kid. I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere. Are you?" He didn't answer. and that silence cut deeper than anything Jake could say. I left, my chest tight, and threw myself into archery, firing arrows until my fingers bled. Sam found me there, his face grim. Jake's telling everyone you and Ethan are. You know, he said, his voice low. He says he saw you two at the lake. My stomach dropped. What did he see? Nothing clear, Sam said, shrugging. But he's making it sound bad. You need to be careful, man. I nodded. But careful wasn't what I wanted. I wanted Ethan to fight for us, to stand up and say this was worth it. But as the day wore on, I saw him slipping further away, his smiles forced, his eyes distant. That night, the camp held its final big event, a dance in the mess hall. The room was strung with fairy lights, the music loud and pulsing. I didn't want to go, but Sam dragged me, insisting I needed to show those jerks you don't care. I stood at the edge of the room, watching campers laugh and dance, their joy a stark contrast to the storm in my chest. Ethan was there, leaning against the wall, his arms crossed. Our eyes met, and for a moment, I thought he'd come to me. But then Jake sauntered over to him, whispering something, and Ethan's face hardened. He left the room without a backward glance. I followed, my heart pounding. I found him outside, pacing in the moonlight. What did Jake say? I asked, my voice sharp. Ethan stopped, his hands clenched. He's threatening to tell the director. Says he's got proof we've been too close. Proof? I scoffed. He's got nothing. Doesn't matter, Ethan said, his voice low. Rumors are enough. I could lose my job. Elliot, you could get sent home. Then we tell the truth, I said, desperate. We haven't done anything wrong. He laughed, a bitter sound. The truth doesn't matter when people have made up their minds. You think they'll believe us over Jake? I stepped closer, my voice fierce. I don't care what they believe. I care about you. He looked at me, his eyes raw, and for a moment, I thought he'd give in. But then he shook his head. I'm leaving tomorrow, he said. It's the only way. The words hit like a slap. You're running, I said, my voice breaking. After everything, you're just giving up. I'm not giving up, he said, his voice hoarse. I'm trying to protect you. Stop saying that, I shouted, tears burning my eyes. You're protecting yourself. You're scared, and I get it. But don't pretend this is for me. He reached for me, his hand trembling. But I stepped back. Elliot, please, he said. I love you. That's why I have to go. I froze, his words echoing the whisper I'd heard weeks ago. But this time, they didn't feel like a lifeline. They felt like a goodbye. I turned and ran, the night swallowing me whole. I didn't stop until I reached the lake, my chest heaving, my face wet with tears. I wanted to hate him, to hate myself for believing we could have this. But all I felt was loss, sharp and unending, as the summer I'd thought would save me slipped away. The final day of Camp Willow Lake dawned gray and heavy, the sky mirroring the weight in my chest. Ethan was leaving. The words looped in my mind, each one a fresh wound. I'd spent the night by the lake, curled up on the dock, trying to make sense of a summer that had promised so much and delivered only heartbreak. I avoided the mess hall, skipping breakfast to wander the trails alone. Sam found me by the archery range, his face etched with worry. You look like hell, he said, tossing me a granola bar. What happened? I didn't answer. I couldn't. The truth was too raw, too fragile. Sam didn't push, just sat beside me, his presence a quiet anchor. Whatever it is, he said finally, you're not alone. Okay. His words broke something in me, and I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. I wasn't alone. Not entirely. But without Ethan, it felt like I'd lost a piece of myself. The camp was buzzing with end-of-summer preparations packing. Goodbyes. Promises to stay in touch. I moved through it like a ghost, my eyes searching for Ethan despite myself. I found him near the counselor's cabin, loading his duffel bag into a truck. My heart lurched, but I forced myself to approach. Elliot, he said, his voice low when he saw me. His eyes were red, like he hadn't slept either. You shouldn't be here. I'm done with shouldn't, I said, my voice steady despite the ache. You're leaving, and I need to know why. The real reason. He sighed, setting the bag down. I told you. It's not safe for either of us. Jake's rumors are spreading, and if the director finds out, then we fight. I cut in. We tell the truth. We don't let people like Jake win. He shook his head, a sad smile tugging at his lips. You're braver than I am. Elliot, I wish I could be like you. You can, I said, stepping closer. You don't have to run. We can figure this out together. For a moment, he looked like he might stay, like my words had reached him. But then his shoulders slumped, and he picked up his bag. I'm sorry, he said. I can't. He climbed into the truck, and I stood there, watching as it pulled away, dust rising in its wake. I wanted to scream, to chase after him, but my feet wouldn't move. He was gone, and I was left with nothing but the echo of his love and the sting of his fear. The camp closed that afternoon, and I boarded the bus back to Ohio. Sam beside me. He didn't ask about Ethan, but he kept me talking. His story's a lifeline pulling me back to myself. When we reached my stop, he hugged me, quick and fierce. You're gonna be okay, he said. You're stronger than you think. I nodded, but I didn't believe him. Not yet. Back home, the world felt smaller, grayer. My parents asked about camp, and I gave them vague answers, unable to share the truth. I spent days in my room, replaying every moment with Ethan, trying to understand where it went wrong. Then, a week later, a letter arrived. No return address, just my name in Ethan's sharp handwriting. My hands shook as I opened it. Elliot, it began. I'm sorry for leaving. You were right, I was scared. I still am. But you showed me something I'd forgotten, how to be brave. I'm going to find my brother, to make things right. And maybe, one day, I'll find you too. You deserve a love that doesn't hide. I hope I can be that for you someday. Ethan. I read it again and again, tears blurring the words. It wasn't a promise. Not exactly. But it was hopey a spark I could hold on to. I thought about my own future, about the person I wanted to be. I wasn't ready to come out. Not yet. But Ethan's letter reminded me I didn't have to hide forever. That night, I pulled out my laptop and started writing not a letter, but a story. My story. About a boy who found love in a summer camp, who learned that love wasn't just about holding on, but about letting go, about choosing to fight for who you are. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. As I wrote, I realized something. Ethan hadn't just broken my heart. He'd shown me how to mend it, how to build a life where I could be proud, where I could love without fear. And maybe, one day, our paths would cross again, not as coach and camper, but as two people ready to face the world together. For now, I had myself, and that was enough. The summer was over, but my story was just beginning.